Hey everyone, it's Jacqueline. I'm back after nearly 5 years. Today I have a video for you all about the presidency. It's a continuation of my series on the US government and civic participation. So I'm really excited to share it with you all today. And let's get started. First of all, the road to the presidency. As you know, 2020 is an election year. So this is all really relevant right now. First, let's talk eligibility. There are a few requirements to be president. First of all, age. The person has to be at least 35 years old. Second, they have to be a resident of the US for at least 14 years. And third, they have to be a natural-born citizen. The last requirement is the most interesting of all, legally speaking. So in a nutshell, natural-born citizen means born on US soil or born to at least one parent who is a US citizen. This means that even if a person is born outside of the United States, to at least one of their parents being a US citizen, the person is a natural-born citizen. So, for example, this was a topic of conversation during the 2016 election when one of the contenders was Senator Ted Cruz. Ted Cruz was born in Canada, and people were talking about, oh, can he be president? And it turns out, yes, he could. So let me explain. First of all, we have the 14th Amendment, which says, among other things, it says, all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States, meaning a person born on US soil is a citizen. Also, the Naturalization Act of 1790, which was adopted by the first Congress, said that the children of citizens of the United States born beyond the sea or out of the limits of the United States shall be considered as natural-born citizens. More recent immigration laws say a child born abroad to an American parent or both American parents is a citizen by birth. So, a person is either born with citizenship or has citizenship at birth, or the person has to be naturalized, right? So the first option, if you're born with citizenship, there are two reasons for why you might have citizenship at birth. One reason is being born on US soil, automatic citizenship. And the second reason is one or both of your parents are US citizens. That makes you a US citizen. So because you have citizenship at birth, you're considered a natural-born citizen, and you do not need to be naturalized. Naturalized citizens, as opposed to natural-born citizens, are people who are citizens of foreign countries, and they come to the United States, and they go through a naturalization process. So, after the requirements of eligibility are out of the way, let's talk about campaigning. Once a candidate raises or spends more than $5,000 for their campaign, they must register with the Federal Election Commission. Candidates win delegates in the primary elections and caucuses. Then, the delegates vote at the party's national conventions, which are held every election year. The candidate who wins the most delegates becomes the nominee for that party. Then candidates must choose a running mate. So with Joe Biden, this happened fairly recently as well. After he became the nominee, he had to choose a running mate, that being Kamala Harris. The general election is statutorily the Tuesday after the first Monday in November. and it is frequently a competition for independent voters and swing states. This year it's going to be on November 3rd. Candidates debate each other on television, and they also campaign through commercials, social media, etc. So, primary elections and caucuses. State primaries are run by state and local governments. Voting happens through a secret ballot. People go to a polling place and vote, just like they would on November 3rd. Caucuses, however, are private meetings run by political parties. They're held at the county, district, or precinct level. In most, participants divide themselves into groups according to the candidate they support. Undecided voters form their own group. Each group gives speeches supporting its candidate and tries to get others to join its group. At the end, the number of voters in each group determines how many delegates each candidate has won. By the way, Guam, the Virgin Islands, the Northern Mariana Islands, American Samoa, and Puerto Rico, which are all U.S. territories, also hold presidential primaries and caucuses. Both primaries and caucuses can be open, closed, or some hybrid of the two. During an open primary or caucus, people can vote for a candidate of any political party. During a closed primary or caucus, only voters registered with that party can take part and vote. Semi-open and semi-closed primaries and caucuses are variations of the two main types. So, in each state and in each territory, these primaries or caucuses may be different, and in fact they are different. Each state and each territory has either a primary or a caucus, and they can be open, closed, or a hybrid. The Electoral College. Under the Constitution, the candidate who receives a majority of votes in the Electoral College becomes president. Now, each state, we have 50 states, receives a number of electors equal to its total number of members in Congress. And, as you should remember from my past videos, states have 2 senators for each and every state, and then the number of representatives in the House is based on population. So, the number of electoral votes are based on population. Okay, and then there are 3 electoral votes for DC. Total, 538. That means that a majority is 270 votes. So the candidate who wins at least 270 electoral votes becomes the president. Guam, the Virgin Islands, the Northern Mariana Islands, American Samoa, and Puerto Rico do not participate in the general election for president because the Electoral College does not allow it, which is really interesting because with the territories, according to acts of Congress, persons born in each of these territories, except American Samoa, are U.S. citizens. People born in American Samoa are U.S. nationals. A little bit different, but the point is we have all of these U.S. citizens residing in these territories, and they don't get to vote in the presidential election. Yeah, it's really amazing. Unfortunately, they don't get to vote. Moving on, states determine how electors are chosen. Now, there are 2 different systems. The winner-take-all system and the district system. So winner-take-all states are all of the states and DC except for Maine and Nebraska. In all of these states, the winner of the popular vote in the state receives all of the electoral votes for that state. Now, in the district system, which is Maine and Nebraska, the winner of the popular vote in the state receives 2 electoral votes, while the winner in each congressional district receives 1 electoral vote. So, what's attempted here is to make it more proportional to how the vote has been split. Okay, so basically what happens during the general election is the electors are chosen. And then there's an electoral vote. More on that later. Let me just show you this map of the electoral votes, which, as I just explained, is the number of members of Congress for each state. And we can tell that this is based on population because, for example, Montana, which is huge, has 3 electoral votes, and New Jersey, where I'm from, which is really tiny, but is very densely populated, has 14 electoral votes. Okay, so the general election versus the electoral college vote. The general election determines each state's electors, and electors are people who pledge to vote for a certain candidate. So that's the idea behind electors. The electoral college vote occurs in mid-December, not in November, okay? While the Constitution does not require electors to vote as they pledged, many state laws aim to bind the electors. And these are the following states: Alabama, Alaska, Arizona, California, Colorado, Connecticut, Delaware, DC, Florida, Hawaii, Indiana, Maine, Maryland, Massachusetts, Michigan, Minnesota, Mississippi, Montana, Nebraska, Nevada, New Mexico, North Carolina, Oklahoma, Ohio, Oregon, South Carolina, Tennessee, Vermont, Virginia, Washington, Wisconsin, and Wyoming. These laws, what they do is they impose fines on, or they disqualify and replace what are called faithless electors, people that pledge to vote for one candidate, but then they turn around and vote for another. And in July of 2020, very recently, there was a Supreme Court decision which upholds these laws. So, one last thing about this general election versus electoral college vote. On the day of the general election, we learn who the winner is, but really that's a projected winner. And then the electoral college vote determines who the winner is. So after the 2016 election, there was all this talk about convincing electors to vote a different way so that Hillary Clinton would be president instead of Donald Trump. In the end, that didn't happen. But, if you heard all that talk and you didn't really understand, this is the explanation behind it, if you will. So red versus blue states, this is just the notion that states typically tend to go one way or another. Like some states are very well known to be either a red state or a blue state. So we have 2 main parties in the United States, the Democrats and the Republicans. So Democrats are blue, Republicans are red, and these are states that are either traditionally Republican or traditionally Democrat. And here we have a map from 2015 The states that are colored in purple are what we call swing states. So a swing state is a state where you're not really sure how it's going to go. It could go one way or another. And as I mentioned before, the presidential campaign is often a competition for these swing states. So the map changed a little bit in 2020. This is an updated version of that same map. But for instance, we see states like California and New York, blue states, and we see Texas, red state. That doesn't really change. Some other states have changed a little bit. Okay, so the thing with the Electoral College is that it is possible to become president without winning the popular vote because of the whole winner-take-all dynamic. And this has actually happened in the history of our country 5 times. First of all, in 1824, John Quincy Adams. In 1876, Rutherford B. Hayes. In 1888, Benjamin Harrison. In 2000, George W. Bush. And most recently, in 2016, Donald Trump. All of these presidents did not win the popular vote, but they won because of the Electoral College system and legitimately became president. So historically, most of the presidents have been Protestant white men. We have not had a woman president yet, unfortunately, but I have faith that we will. Obama, former President Barack Obama, was the first non-white person to hold the office of the president, and former President John Kennedy is the only non-Protestant to have held the office. He was a Catholic. Term limits. George Washington, the very first president of the United States, set a precedent when he stepped down from office after 2 terms. So the president is in office for 4 years at a time. Okay, so George Washington stepped down after 2 terms. That would be after 8 years. After him, presidents did not run for office more than 2 terms, except Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who was in office for 4 consecutive terms. Now, the 22nd Amendment said that presidents cannot be elected more than twice. So now we have a law, the 22nd Amendment, that says that the limit is 2 terms. Okay, presidential succession. Who becomes president if something happens to the president? The president dies, the president is unable to perform his or her duties, or the president is impeached and ultimately removed from office. We have the Succession Act of 1947, which lays down a list to go down. So first of all, the vice president, then the Speaker of the House, then the President pro tempore of the Senate, then the Secretary of State, Secretary of the Treasury, Secretary of Defense, Attorney General, Secretary of the Interior, Secretary of Agriculture, Secretary of Commerce, Secretary of Labor, Secretary of Health and Human Services, Secretary of Housing and Urban Development, Secretary of Transportation, Secretary of Energy, Secretary of Education, Secretary of Veterans Affairs, and finally, Secretary of Homeland Security, in this order. So that's a lot of people to go through. The 25th Amendment to the Constitution says that the Vice President succeeds the President in case of removal from office, death, or resignation. The new president nominates a vice president who is confirmed by a vote in both houses of Congress. When the president believes that he or she is incapable of the duties of office, he or she must inform Congress in writing. If the president is unable to communicate, then a majority of the cabinet, including the vice president, does this. Now, the vice president serves as acting president until the president resumes his or her normal duties. So, in other words, if the president is not okay temporarily, the vice president steps in until the president can resume his or her duties. Next section, the president's roles. He or she has a lot of different roles. So, chief of state, they're the symbolic leader of the country. Chief executive, they execute laws, appoint key federal offices, and grant pardons and clemency, including reprieves. That's a mistake. Sorry about that. Commander-in-chief. The president is the leader of the armed forces. Chief diplomat. He or she negotiates with other countries. Chief legislator. They sign or veto legislation, suggest legislation, and work with Congress on the budget. And finally, super politician. The president helps his or her party raise money and elect candidates. So, chief executive. The president is the head of the executive branch. He or she runs the federal bureaucracy and enforces the laws passed. They nominate members of the cabinet and appointees in charge of the major executive departments and who advise the president about policy. So the cabinet members are basically the secretaries of each department of the executive branch. The president also chooses heads of agencies, federal judges, including the Supreme Court justices and 2,000 lesser jobs. The Senate must approve the nominations, and the president can fire all of these officials, except obviously for judges and justices. He can't fire them, but he does appoint them. So this is a huge deal. The federal judges and the Supreme Court justices are a huge thing for a president. The staff. So the White House staff, their job is to organize the schedule, set priorities, and work with Congress. The president usually chooses close friends and trusted advisors. In the case of President Trump, one of his senior advisors is his daughter, Ivanka, so that's a pretty good example of that. There is the White House Chief of Staff, and there's also what's called the Kitchen Cabinet, which means the president's closest advisors. So pardons and clemency. A pardon means releasing someone convicted of a crime from punishment. And in theory, this allows the president to prevent a miscarriage of justice. Now, it's important to remember this does not negate guilt, but rather is a sign of forgiveness, and it can occur posthumously as well. Clemency. There are 3 different types of clemencies: commutations, remissions, and reprieves. So, in the case of a commutation, the punishment originally imposed is substituted with less severe punishment. So, for instance, people who are given life sentences without the possibility of parole for nonviolent drug offenses, right? We've heard about the president commuting the sentence, so the person gets out of jail immediately after having served however long they've served in jail. Remission means relief from a forfeiture, penalty, or restitution order, and a reprieve is a formal postponement of the execution of a criminal sentence. Okay, the commander-in-chief. The president is a civilian, but he or she controls the military. The president can send troops into battle without a formal declaration of war from Congress and has final authority over military operations. The War Powers Resolution requires that the president consult with Congress when sending our forces into action. He or she must report to Congress within 48 hours of sending troops, and Congress must approve the use of troops within 60 days or extend the 60-day time limit. If neither of those things happen, then the forces must be withdrawn after 60 days. Chief Diplomat. There are what we call executive agreements, which are agreements made with foreign leaders that do not require Senate approval. However, it's important to remember that Congress may choose not to fund these agreements. Also, these agreements are not necessarily binding on future presidents. A diplomatic recognition is a formal acknowledgement of a government as legitimate, which allows the exchange of ambassadors. Chief Legislator. All presidents have a legislative agenda, and the State of the Union Address, which is a yearly televised address to members of Congress, and the purpose of the address is to give the status of the country and to propose legislation. So this is actually a constitutional obligation. In the past, it was sent to Congress in written form. Today, though, it is a crucial political event, extremely publicized, televised, as we have seen over the years. So signing laws, the president signs bills into law. Sometimes the signing of a bill is turned into a ceremony, recorded and publicized. If the bill is unpopular, it's signed in private. If Congress is in session and the president does not sign the bill within 10 days, it becomes law anyway. So maybe if the president doesn't want to draw a lot of attention to him or herself by signing a bill, but Congress is in session, he or she may say, well, I'll ignore this and it'll be law anyway. Sometimes, though, the president includes a signing message explaining his or her support and understanding of the new law. A president has the authority to veto bills. Veto means the president rejects a bill that is passed by Congress. The bill is then sent back to Congress with a veto message, which explains the reasoning for the veto. Congress can override a veto with 2/3 in both houses. Now, there is also what's called a pocket veto, which is when the president neither signs nor vetoes a bill. And this is only while Congress is not in session. So, as long as Congress is not in session, if the president neither signs nor vetoes, during 10 days, the bill dies. And this type of veto is not subject to congressional override. So they cannot override the veto with a 2/3, as they would otherwise be able to do. The next section, the White House / the President's administration. Now, there's what's called the Executive Office of the President, and this includes many different offices. The Office of Management and Budget, the National Security Council, the Council of Economic Advisors, the Office of National Drug Control Policy, the Office of Science and Technology Policy, and finally the Council on Environmental Quality. So I will explain each one of these different offices within the executive office. The Office of Management and Budget has the following goals. First, budget development and execution. Second, management, including oversight of agency performance, human capital, federal procurement, financial management, and information technology. Third, regulatory policy, including coordination and review of all significant federal regulations by executive agencies. Fourth, legislative clearance and coordination. And fifth, executive orders and presidential memoranda. The National Security Council is chaired by the President, and it also includes the Vice President, the Secretary of State, Secretary of the Treasury, Secretary of Defense, and the Assistant to the President for National Security Affairs. The chairperson of the Joint Chiefs of Staff is the statutory military advisor to this council. The Director of National Intelligence is the intelligence advisor. The Chief of Staff to the President, Counsel to the President, and Assistant to the President for Economic Policy are invited to attend any meeting of this council. The Attorney General and Director of the Office of Management and Budget are invited to attend meetings pertaining to their respective responsibilities. The heads of other executive departments and agencies, as well as other senior officials, are also invited to attend meetings when appropriate. The Council of Economic Advisors. It consists of 3 members appointed by the President and confirmed by the Senate. Its policy goal is the following, and this comes from the Employment Act of 1946, so I quote, "Creating and maintaining in a manner calculated to foster and promote free and competitive enterprise and the general welfare, conditions under which there will be afforded useful employment for those able, willing, and seeking work, and to promote maximum employment, production, and purchasing power." So, the Council of Economic Advisors has the following roles. First, it assists and advises the President in the preparation of the economic report. Second, it gathers timely and authoritative information concerning economic developments and economic trends, both current and prospective, and it analyzes and interprets such information in the light of the policy goal that I just read, for the purpose of determining whether such developments and trends are interfering or are likely to interfere with the achievement of such policy, and it compiles and submits to the President studies relating to such developments and trends. Third, it appraises the various programs and activities of the federal government in the light of the policy goal for the purpose of determining the extent to which such programs and activities are contributing and the extent to which they are not contributing to the achievement of such policy, and makes recommendations to the President with respect thereto. Fourth, it develops and recommends to the President national economic policies to foster and promote free competitive enterprise, to avoid economic fluctuations, or to diminish the effects thereof, and to maintain employment, production, and purchasing power. And fifth, it makes and furnishes such studies, reports thereon, and recommendations with respect to matters of federal economic policy and legislation as the President may request. The Office of National Drug Control Policy. This office develops a comprehensive national drug control strategy which aims to reduce substance use through public health and public safety measures. It funds and coordinates the activities of law enforcement, community-based coalitions, and other actors working on the ground to combat substance misuse. And it coordinates the activities and related funding of 16 federal government agencies and departments to reduce the availability of and the demand for illicit substances. The Office of Science and Technology Policy. This office leads interagency science and technology policy coordination efforts. It assists the Office of Management and Budget with an annual review and analysis of federal research and development and budgets. It serves as a source of scientific and technological analysis and judgment for the President with respect to major policies, plans, and programs of the federal government. The Council on Environmental Quality, it oversees the federal agency National Environment Policy Act implementation. So it develops and recommends national policies to the President that promote the improvement of environmental quality and meet the country's goals. It also has various duties and responsibilities under other statutes, executive orders, and presidential memoranda, including with regard to federal ocean policy, federal sustainability, and timely environmental review and permitting processes for infrastructure development and other matters. Presidential departments. There are a lot of these and sub-departments, as you can see, so I will just list all of them. The Domestic Policy Council, the National Economic Council, Office of Cabinet Affairs, Office of Digital Strategy, Office of Intergovernmental Affairs, which focuses on local, state, and tribal governments and bringing them all together. White House Office of Legislative Affairs, Office of Management and Administration, and within this office we have the White House Photo Office, the White House Visitor's Office, the White House Management Office, and the White House Switchboard Office. Then we continue with the Office of Political Affairs, the Office of Presidential Advance, Office of Presidential Correspondence, White House Office of Presidential Personnel, Office of the Public Liaison, and this office is the link between the White House and the outside world. Then we have the Office of Speech Writing, Office of the First Lady, Office of the Staff Secretary, Office of the Vice President, which has a lot of sub-offices, and these would be the Office of the Second Lady, Office of Administration, Office of Advance for the Vice President, Office of Communications, Office of Counsel to the Vice President, Office of Intergovernmental Affairs, the same idea with the state, local, and tribal, Office of Scheduling for the Vice President, Department of Domestic Policy, and Department of Legislative Affairs. And then we continue with the Office of White House Communications, White House Press Office, Office of White House Counsel, which are the White House lawyers. That's what the word counsel means. And finally, the President's Commission on White House Fellowships. So the administration, in a nutshell, consists of the President, the Vice President, the First Lady or Gentleman, the Second Lady or Gentleman, and the Cabinet. And so far, we have had only First Ladies and Second Ladies. It would be nice in the future to see a First or Second Gentleman. We haven't had that yet, but these persons are who we refer to as the administration. Okay, and then there's the Cabinet, so quite a long list here. We have the Vice President, Secretary of Agriculture, Attorney General, Director of the Central Intelligence Agency, Secretary of Commerce, Secretary of Defense, Secretary of Education, Secretary of Energy, Administrator of the Environmental Protection Agency, Secretary of Health and Human Services, the Secretary of Homeland Security, which currently is an acting secretary, but normally it would just be a secretary, the Secretary of Housing and Urban Development, Secretary of the Interior, Secretary of Labor, Director of the Office of Management and Budget, Director of National Intelligence, Administrator of the Small Business Administration, Secretary of State, Secretary of Transportation, Secretary of the Treasury, U.S. Trade Representative, Secretary of Veterans Affairs, and finally the White House Chief of Staff. A lot of people. The next section we have is presidential power. Quite a lot going here. So, first of all, we have 3 types of powers. The constitutional is the power explicitly granted by the Constitution. The delegated is the power granted by Congress to help the president fulfill his or her duties. And the inherent powers are inherent in his or her power as chief of the executive branch. And then we have emergency powers such as declaring a federal disaster area. Executive orders. These are a rule or regulation issued by the president directly that has the force of law. They are issued to enforce statutes, enforce the Constitution or treaties, establish or modify how executive agencies operate. They must be published in the Federal Register, which is the daily publication of federal rules and regulations. Executive privilege. This is the right of officials of the executive branch, such as the president, to refuse to disclose some information to other branches of government or to the public. This includes refusing to appear before congressional committees. In 1974, the Supreme Court ruled it could not be invoked, this executive privilege cannot be invoked to prevent evidence from being used in criminal proceedings against the president. So this is an example of the limits of executive privilege. The Defense Production Act, which is interesting because it's been invoked now with the coronavirus pandemic. So I wanted to talk about this a little bit. This is a law from 1950 and it's been amended subsequently. So this act confers upon the president a broad set of authorities to influence the domestic industry in the interest of national defense. The authorities can be used across the federal government to shape the domestic industrial base so that when called upon, it is capable of providing essential materials and goods needed for the national defense. So, some current DPA authorities include, but are not limited to, first of all, priorities and allocations. These allow the president to require persons, including businesses and corporations, because these are legal persons. They're not physical persons, obviously, but they are legal persons. And they can be required to prioritize and accept contracts for materials and services as necessary to promote the national defense. Second, the expansion of productive capacity and supply. This allows the president to incentivize the domestic industrial base to expand the production and supply of critical materials and goods. Authorized incentives include loans, loan guarantees, direct purchases and purchase commitments, and the authority to procure and install equipment in private industrial facilities. And then we have the general provisions, which includes key definitions. It includes the authority to establish voluntary agreements with private industry, authority to block proposed or pending foreign corporate mergers, which I will talk more about, acquisitions or takeovers that threaten national security, and the authority to employ persons of outstanding experience and ability and to establish a volunteer pool of industry executives who could be called to government service in the interest of the national defense. So let me talk about CFIUS a little bit. This is the Committee on Foreign Investment in the U.S. It is a federal interagency committee which includes the Office of the President, and it operates pursuant to the Defense Production Act. DPA authorizes the President through CFIUS to review any merger, acquisition, or takeover by or with any foreign person, which could result in foreign control of any person engaged in interstate commerce in the U.S. Certain transactions involving foreign investment in the U.S. and certain real estate transactions by foreign persons are covered, and the role of CFIUS is to evaluate whether and to what extent such transactions could impact U.S. national security. In 2018, we had the Foreign Investment Risk Review Modernization Act, and this act broaden the authorities of the President and of CFIUS to review and to take action to address any national security concerns arising from certain non-controlling investments in real estate transactions involving foreign persons. So if a transaction could pose a risk to our national security, the President may suspend or prohibit the transaction or impose conditions on it. I'd like to provide an example of action taken by CFIUS and action taken recently. So you might have heard of the app Grindr, which is a dating/hookup app for gay men. And this app was acquired by a Chinese tech company, and the company actually didn't give notice of the acquisition, but regardless, it was deemed that they had information, they had geographical information on US citizens, they had HIV statuses of their users, and they deemed that it was a threat to national security, and so this company had to undo the acquisition essentially. Also, some more examples, a couple more. CFIUS has blocked the acquisition by Chinese tech companies of the apps MoneyGram and AppLovin. So here's a graph of the CFIUS process. So first of all, there will be a filing to CFIUS, then the company will receive staff feedback and it can revise its notice if it wants to. Then it will submit and obtain a formal acceptance of notice. There's a review period which lasts 30 days upon acceptance, and then there could be an additional 45 days to investigate if necessary. That doesn't have to happen. It could happen that after the 30 days, CFIUS decides to either clear the merger completely without any conditions, or it clears the merger with some mitigating conditions. If that doesn't happen, then there is an additional 45-day investigation. So these 45 days, they don't have to be weighted through. So here, this chart from Latham and Watkins, which is a law firm, explains that the investigation can last up to an additional 45 days. It can be stopped early at any point during that investigation period. Now, if CFIUS has still not resolved any potential national security concerns, meaning it hasn't cleared the acquisition, whether it's with or without mitigating conditions, then CFIUS is responsible for making a formal recommendation to the President as to whether to clear or block the transaction. And then here's where the President, him or herself, comes in and has an additional 15 days in order to decide whether to suspend, prohibit, or impose conditions on the deal. Okay, then we have impeachment, and we have seen this with President Trump very recently. We've seen it with President Clinton, and we've seen it with some other presidents if we go way back in history. So we're talking about Articles 2 and 3 of the Constitution, which authorize the House and Senate to remove the President, Vice President, or other civil officers for crimes of, quote, treason, bribery, or other high crimes and misdemeanors, end quote. So this means that we're not just talking about the president. This applies to a lot of other people. But for the purposes of this presentation, obviously impeachment does apply to the president. So the process begins in the House, which impeaches, in other words, accuses the president. The House votes to impeach and writes up articles of impeachment. We saw that happen with President Trump and Clinton, and submits them to the Senate. The Senate then conducts the trial, and the trial is presided by the Supreme Court's Chief Justice, with the Senate as jurors. So they vote by a majority vote whether to convict or acquit. And generally speaking, they tend to vote along party lines. So far, President Clinton, for instance, he was acquitted, and President Trump also acquitted. The president and the public. So, former President Teddy Roosevelt had a stewardship theory, and he believed that the president has the right to do whatever the country needs within the limits of the law. So the constituency of the president is the American people. It can be referred to as the Washington community, but any American citizen is a constituent of the president, basically the American people. So the media plays a big role, especially nowadays. We've been seeing this a lot with President Trump. He's very vocal on Twitter, etc. We also saw it with former President Obama and his campaign, especially, very big online. So social media is being increasingly used because the presidents like to speak to the people directly. And here I have some of the official and personal channels because right now Donald Trump is President Trump, but whenever a new president comes along, it is always a good idea to find out what their accounts are. The White House and at POTUS official channels aren't going to change. They're just taken over by whoever the new president is. So if you follow those, you'll be good. But, you can choose to follow the personal account of the president as well if you're interested. So the White House is on YouTube, it's on Twitter, it's on Facebook, and it's on Instagram. POTUS is on Twitter and Facebook. Donald Trump has his own personal accounts on these as well. It's a really good idea to subscribe to the White House's channel on YouTube, because I've found out that if you're not subscribed, you won't get notified about certain live videos. So, which I'm not sure why, but apparently only if you are subscribed will you have access to those videos, which is really strange, and I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that's how it works. So I really encourage you to subscribe just to be in the know. And then the White House has a daily newsletter that if you're interested, you could subscribe to that. And the link is right here, whitehouse.gov/1600 daily sign up. Also, you can write to the president. So the address of the White House is 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue Northwest, Washington, D.C. 20500. And you can also go online to the contact form. And basically, what I would suggest if you're writing to the president is, introduce yourself. You always want to include your full legal name, or at least your name, your first and last name, and not nicknames. You always want to include your address, street address, state, city, state, and zip code, because that way they know where you're from and they can actually verify. And also the wording that you should write to any politician that represents you, whether it's the president, whether it's your senators, your congresspeople, in the House of Representatives, whoever it is, you should always write as your constituent, then, whatever you want them to do, support this or don't support that, or do this or do that, whatever it may be. And then finally, you can directly petition the White House. I know change.org is a big thing, but the White House has its own petitions platform, which is really cool. It's called petitions.whitehouse.gov, and I will show you how to get in here, and you can create a petition, you can sign a petition, and what's really cool is that once the petitions reach a threshold of signatures, the White House is required to respond. So you'll get a response on the petition. So I think that's really cool. Here we are on the petitions.whitehouse.gov site. So here we have petitions that we can sign, and they have the goal of 100,000. That's when the White House must respond. You can create a petition, so let me click on this link real quick. Okay, so it will ask you to log in or create an account. As you can see, I have an account here. Here on the right, you can create an account. You have to provide your first name, last name, email, and it'll ask you a math question to pretty much confirm that you are an actual human being. So let me close this out. And then we have petitions here that that are available for signing. So for instance, if we click on one of these petitions, anyone, the first one, I'll open it up in a new tab here. And we have this one, right? So here you can read what the petition is about. You have different tags here. And then you need to put in your first name, last name, email address, and sign now. And then what's going to happen, you can unclick this box, by the way, so they don't fill you up with spam. Or you can keep it checked, whatever you prefer. And then you can click sign now. And what's going to happen is you're going to get an email in your inbox that asks you to confirm your signature. So you have to go to your email and you have to confirm your signature, and then it'll bring you to a page that says your signature has been recorded or you've signed the petition, something along those lines. I do recommend, if you want to, creating an account on this website. It's a good idea. And if you do that, I definitely recommend always being signed in when you are signing a petition. And then also view petitions with updates. So ones that the White House has responded to. So for instance, these are all petitions that have reached that threshold and have already been responded to. So you can click view, and then you can see the response from the Trump administration in this case. And also, I believe that when you create a petition, it will show you similar ones in case you might as well just sign a petition that's already been created instead of creating your own. Then it'll give you a link and you can put this on your social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, whatever, get the word out there, have people sign it, and then the White House has to directly respond if you reach that threshold. So this is a pretty cool site. I definitely encourage people to use it. I think at least it's a way to get a dialogue started, perhaps, or to bring awareness of certain issues to the White House that they may not be paying attention to. So it's a cool thing. It's kind of like change.org, but what's nice is that they actually have to reply. So it's putting some pressure in that sense. And it'll get you the satisfaction of getting a response, at least. Whether it's what you want or not is a different story, but at least there's a two-way dialogue, which is nice. That is all for this video. I know it was really long, so thank you for bearing with me. And I'm just so happy that I can share with you. I hope you all learned something new today. I hope you think this video is useful. And if you have any questions, any doubts or concerns, please put them in the comments or write to me privately and I will try to help you. And thank you so much for coming to my channel. If you like my videos, please click subscribe. Please like if you like the video. And thank you so much for being here, for watching, for bearing with me to the end. And I hope you all have a great day. Bye, guys.